Hello there, and welcome back to the Film Score podcast. This is it, the last episode of Season 5. Felt like a very long time coming for me. I was waiting for it to happen, and then good opportunities kept coming up, just like this one. So we're wrapping up Season 5 with an interview with Max Richter. Been a fan of Max's music for quite a while, probably predating my interest in film music in general. Always fun to talk to people like that. Though you've got to make sure that the fanboy side stays buried, more or less. Unsurprisingly, Max and I spend most of the conversation talking about Hamnet, the Jessie Buckley, Paul Mescal film, directed by Chloe Zhao. Comes out in a couple weeks limited release, with a wide release in December, I think. Really good score, really emotional, and, big surprise, includes his very famous song, On the Nature of Daylight. I know people get a little weird about this being used at this point because it's been in so many things, but the story as to why it was used, how it came to be in the film, and the impact that it had, really good. And of course, you'll find that story here. And we touch on some other things. Naturally, I derail us getting into a topic or line of conversation that I find interesting and want to jump down, although we only had about 20 minutes here, so I had to keep things a bit slimmer, really moving quickly. Downside being I do myself no favor sometimes. Mention Ad Astra, if you don't know, that had a pretty troubled production and scoring process. Max makes very clear his thoughts on that, and gosh, if we had more time, I'd have loved to have gone down that rabbit hole. We didn't, though. Maybe I have Max on again, we'll talk about it. Who knows? Of course, you can find out more about Max online and do the same for me. If you're enjoying the show, leave a rating, leave a review, send me an email and tell me how amazing it is. It's the stuff that I live for, and it's why I do it. Not really. Now, like I said, this is the end of Season 5, as I've done between basically every single season, maybe literally every single season. There's probably going to be some interviews here and there between the end of this season and the start of 6. We shall see. Until then, though, sit back and enjoy. Max, thank you so much for joining me today. How have you been?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
Although you are, I'd say, relatively prolific broadly, you're only doing a handful of film scores. So with the rollout, Hamnet has been in film festivals for probably a couple months now. Limited release later this month, wide release next month, I think. With that whole process, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I basically do films I fall in love with. That's why I don't do that many, When this script came through the door, I read it and I was like, right, I'm in. That's it. We're done. I knew Chloe's work. I loved previous films, especially Nomadland. And I met Chloe and she's great. So it was a no-brainer to do it. In terms of like the festival circuit the film's been doing, I mean, it's actually been really interesting because it's a beautiful way to learn what the film means to the audience. As filmmakers, as artists, we have ideas about what we're making. But it's really only when the audience connects to it that you start to have a broader understanding. That's always really fascinating. So yeah, it's been a very enjoyable experience just to kind of be out there a little bit with the movie and to get a sense of how it's landing in the world.
Well, with that in mind, you had written some suites prior to shooting that were then played on set, and then here you're watching it with an audience. So in both, you're seeing, the audience, whether it's the actual film-going audience or the audience, the actors, the crew, etc. So did any of their reactions to your music surprise you?
I guess I'm always surprised to some extent, yeah, because, when you make something, here I'm sort of sitting at a table, scribbling on a piece of paper or playing the piano, whatever it is. I know what it means to me. I know what my intentions are. But yeah, everybody listens through the prism of their biography. The music they're into, the movies they've seen, their whole culture, their life story. And yeah, it can be surprising. But, that's one of the great things about creativity. It's a way to experience other minds, both as an artist and as a member of the audience. I mean, this is such a wonderful thing.
I suppose with that in mind, so a lot of your solo projects tend to have maybe a thematic idea behind them.
Yeah.
Something that's the intent of you in the project. Now, do you find that, and maybe it's hard to know, but that idea always resonates with the audience, or because everyone is hearing it through their own lens, their own experience, that maybe it's something different entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those things sort of can be true at the same time, really. Take, for example, a project like Sleep, a piece to be experienced, not really listened to, but to be kind of inhabited overnight. And yeah, people do use it for that. And we sometimes play it overnight, live. But also, people use it for, they go to the office and they start coding or whatever, and they stick the piece on. And when the piece is finished, that's 8 hours, they go home, they're done. Or people have it in, for yoga or for, giving birth. It's used in palliative care. It's, so many different settings. So, these things kind of go on a journey and they find their own way into people's lives, and people connect to them very personally. I mean, maybe another example is, in this film, there is a use of an existing piece of mine on the nature of daylight. So that was written as part of an album from 2004, the Blue Notebooks, which is a kind of anti-war protest album. So that's, what that piece of music meant to me at that time. But, it's found its home in a lot of different contexts over the years. So for me, it's one of the pleasures of making things is, trying to get a little window into how other people respond to them.
I feel like the reference to On the Nature of Daylight's so interesting in this context because it was written as part of an album 21 years ago, and yet because it's been used in so many other contexts, you'll often see when it's used in something else. Like, for instance, when it became known that it was going to be used in Hamnet, you see some reactions of people saying, oh, well, actually, like, why is it being used? Because the ultimate use of it was in X film, Y show. It shouldn't be used again. And it's like, well, that was still a use of it called a derivative use. You're not seeing people say, well, it was perfect in the Blue Notebooks, and that should be that.
That's right. I hadn't thought of that. That's true. Yeah. People refer to other films that it's been used in, but less so to the record. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
With that, just because it is, at this point, such a well-known piece, do you ever think about that when someone wants to use it in another project of, hey, it's been used enough, let this breathe, or it's a piece of music,
Yeah.
A million people are listening to it a day, so why not
Yeah.
play it more?
Well, look, I had exactly that experience with Hamnet. I wrote music for the end of the film. I assumed we would not be using it, that I would be scoring it. But actually, I got quite deep into it with Chloe, and there was a really fascinating story about how the piece ended up in the film. And that kind of, for me, convinced me that, Chloe's decision to use the piece made sense. Basically, on the page, in the script, the film ends when Hamlet says, the rest is silence, he dies. That's it. So there isn't this whole ending sequence of the film. That wasn't there. Now, Chloe, coming towards the end of the shoot, was getting increasingly unhappy with that ending, but didn't have an answer. So 4 days before the end of the shoot, Jesse sent her On the Nature of Daylight, which is a piece Chloe didn't know. And she listened to it on the way to the set and had this kind of epiphany, this kind of illumination of like, I know what the end of the film is. And got to set and said, forget everything that we're supposed to be doing today. We're rewriting the ending of the film and it's going to be this. And then they play On the Nature of Daylight on the set for 10 hours continuously and put together this new ending. So, from my standpoint, of course, I'm thinking, oh, I'll replace that because I've, got a vision of the score and this is what I'm going to do. But, talking it through with Chloe, she's a phenomenal filmmaker, extraordinary filmmaker who's made all of these great decisions all the way through the film. And it's got to this kind of point. And this is another decision. It's her decision to make, right? It's her movie. It's her vision. So ultimately, I supported that idea.
And then, of course, that means you got a writing credit out of it, right?
Exactly.
I do find Hamnet in particular such an interesting case because of On the Nature of Daylight and because of how rare it is for a composer to be writing music prior to shooting and then have that inform the film. So often the film is more or less wrapped. you're coming in 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks post-production doing the score. And then here instead, so many of your works, both written purposely for the film, but also accidentally, we'll say, come to inform it. Do you feel like that gives you more of an impact on it or more of a connection to it than you might otherwise have?
Yeah, I really think it's better to be in early at the beginning of a process. I mean, I read the script, I wrote sort of half an hour of music pretty much straight away over a couple of days and just kind of had a kind of first reaction to the material. And I sent all of that over to Chloe, and they were using that when they were shooting. They had it playing in the woods, and just it became part of the texture of, in a way, the world building process. And then, as the edit developed, once they started making assemblies, those little fragments were also part of that. So then the score could really evolve organically alongside the development of the edit. And I just feel like there's a sort of a better logic, a better architectural kind of dynamics then between the music and the rest of the other elements in the film, and they can sort of speak to one another a bit more deeply. This sort of kind of production line process where, you get essentially a locked cut. Please replace the temp, I mean, that doesn't feel very creative, it just feels like it's shortchanging the whole process. There are sort of, if you like, industrial reasons why that process is common, but I just don't think it's the best process creatively. So, great to have an opportunity to really spend time with Chloe and the film team and just sort of get really deep into it. Yeah, it was a great pleasure.
Do you think that there's a way that could be changed so that it was actually more normal to bring a composer on? Or because, look, you go back to a score like Gone with the Wind, and Max Steiner had 10 orchestrators working on it with him to get something out really fast. So it's something that's just been done in film almost since its inception.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just to do with the way the economics work, because by the time the cut is sort of locked, I mean, the clock's ticking, right?
Yeah.
And, they spent all the money, and can we get it on the screen, please? So I get it. I do understand. But I just feel like it's just generally bad. I mean, sometimes, look, sometimes you'll get into a situation where you've got like a couple of weeks or something to write. So, and it's sort of very like going into battle, isn't it? At that point, just kind of making stuff really, really fast. And I mean, I guess that has a certain kind of energy. And for some kinds of projects, it could be really, it could sort of in a way support the whole texture of them. But something like this, which is very, it's a really deep piece of storytelling, really thoughtful, really nuanced, really subtle. It just does take time to kind of understand all the dimensions of it. And I don't think you could do something like that, or you couldn't do justice to it, if you're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
I mean, I suppose some of it too depends on the production process itself. You look at a film like Ad Astra, which, from what I've read, had different production issues and issues with, the music and all that. So sometimes it's just part of the process as well.
Yeah. I mean, Ad Astra was obviously pure chaos, really, in terms of workflow. What can I say? I mean, it was chaos inside a train wreck, inside, a disaster. So it is what it is.
And if we had more than 20 minutes, I was going to grill you on all of that, because I really like the film, your score, Lorne Balfe's score, but there's, such a story behind that, but I won't derail us. Now, one other aspect of Hamnet that I found really interesting is in the credits, there is, I think, a historical music consultant credited. You've mentioned that the Elizabethan period, wonderful period for music, and yet, of course, the bulk of the music in the film is anachronistic. It's not Elizabethan, at least. So what's the thought process of whether to lean into something that's, we'll call it period-specific, period-appropriate, versus something that isn't?
Yeah, I mean, I decided pretty much straight away I didn't want to do anything which felt like Elizabethan pastiche. I wanted the score to exist really in the psychological realm, which is, in a way, universal and timeless. I did take some kind of DNA from Elizabethan music, the principle of choral writing, which is a lot, obviously, Tallis and Bird and all those guys. So I took that as a kind of, let's work with that color. And then I thought, okay, so there's some other good colors, which is the, early bowed strings, so viol ensemble, the sort of drone instruments, hurdy-gurdy, nickel harper, these kinds of things, which kind of, in a way, exist both within Elizabethan music culture and also in a kind of folkloristic musical culture, because there's quite a lot of witchy energy in the film,
Yes.
It's sort of Earth Mother witchy energy, which I really wanted to speak to. So those were my sort of starting points psychologically and in terms of music history. The instrumental material I made basically by recording loads of these instruments and then turning them into, in a way, abstract versions of themselves. So by electronic manipulation and processing, so that they still had this sort of graininess and grittiness of the instruments of that time, but I could use them in a kind of contemporary way. So paint with them rather than notate everything. The choral material, I worked with an early music choir who specialized in that material. Again, I made a lot of different colors using those vocal sounds. And then again, in a way, painted with them in quite an abstract way. There is also some more traditional choral writing at a couple of spots, one of which is the kind of entry to the Globe, where there's a sort of a big moment of drama, and then the choir really sings kind of for the first time. Aside from that, the vocal material is really, it's all women's voices. There's a lot of soloistic vocal material, which is, I guess, it connects us to Jessie's character, Agnes. The film, as well as being about family and about a relationship, I think is very much about motherhood. It's Jessie's character, it's Emily's character. It's also ultimately, I think in this story, it's Mother Earth as well, The film opens with this extraordinary sort of image of Jessie sort of in this kind of forest womb, So the choral material I think of as kind of amniotic fluid, kind of holding this kind of psychology of the film.
I think it's a great choice because it's easy for the audience, I think, to draw that connection or those connections without it being so obvious that it's so on the nose that it almost detracts from it instead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even though the film is full of, in a way, very high stakes situations and kind of big emotional beats, I did feel like the music I didn't want any kind of feeling of one-to-one sort of obviousness. I wanted the music to kind of really, in a way, be transparent to the action and the psychology. So yeah, I mean, I think those choral colors and then also some of the electronic music later on, it all feels very, yeah, I mean, transparent is the word I was sort of going for all the time, really, to try and just kind of let the action, let the psychology, let the storytelling sort of glow through the music.
Well, it also comes through both in how the score is restrained in the amount of music there is, but also I think in that sonic palette as well. It isn't a 90-piece orchestra that it has this massive sound. It is transparent's a good word for it because there is that, we'll say, a lightness to it that doesn't feel overbearing.
And I think that's to do with I guess another thing that I was sort of very aware of, and I think Chloe was very aware of, is, because this material is very emotional, there's a real danger of like sentimentality, And so I think she's been, as a piece of filmmaking, dealing with these kinds of issues. I think it's brilliantly handled, how it never feels sentimental. It's very, very, it's almost got a sort of, almost like a documentary feel, in a way. It's like, it's got this kind of brilliant, balanced feel about it. It doesn't, I don't know, it's a kind of objectivity, but it's quite magical. I guess that's one thing we were also looking for with the music, not to kind of overload things, just kind of in a way trust the material, which is easy to do actually because the performances are so unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like when you've got material like that, it's not like you need to do an awful lot, just small things, just a little bit.
I mean, that's exactly because I think the ending, perfect way. The audience, when I saw it, you could hear a lot of tears in there. I think in large part, or at least in part, because of the score. But Max, I know you've got a tight schedule, so I'll let you go. It was great chatting with you. I really appreciate you jumping on and talking real quick.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
All right,
Thanks.
take care. Thanks.
Yeah.